You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
Hi, you are very welcome. I am Ahonu, and with me today is Annie Jansen. Annie, we'd love to hear about your background. You have done so much in your life, and you have raised 4 sons, and from there, I understand that you have had some great life lessons. But you've also done amazing things like the emotion code and biogeometry and so on. So tell us a little bit about how all that came together.
Well, it seems to me that those who have experienced some type of trauma, and I think really we all have, it's just whether, was it this life, was it a past life, was it in the womb, who knows? Who knows where that trauma was? But it seems to me that the ones who do experience trauma, as I recognize it now, that we study endlessly and we just keep learning and learning and learning. Although I was kind of born with just the desire that I needed to help others. That was like my purpose. I was born with that. But deep down inside, you really can't help many people until you really figure yourself out.
Well,
So,
I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we don't know that. We can't see that we have to do some figuring it out. It's all projected out. And so what I've learned, I probably have read, I was looking at Anna Rose's, what her background was, and she sounds similar to me. I've probably read 200-300 books plus, on self-help, and then I've taken so many different courses.
Yes.
And things come together, but it's until you have that very much, I would call it awareness of seeing, until you can begin to make some changes, some permanent changes. So I came from a really large family, 8 kids at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really where my trauma started.
Right.
And yeah, that's where my trauma started. I did one interview a while back called The Hero's Journey. And I was very, very open. That's one thing. I've always been very open. I'm not ashamed of my background. It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it now as being something that I probably chose to help me overcome, learn experiences on this earth. So I was raised with a family of 7 girls and 1 boy. And my own parents had a very unique background. And their background sort of helps understand some of their behavior, which when you're a child, you don't care about any of that, right? You want a safe mother and a safe father.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that so we can put it in context.
Okay. So I grew up, I would say, in an abusive family. However, I never knew that. I always said my family was very normal. It wasn't until later on. And so my father was very explosive. He would be normal, but you never knew when he was going to explode. And I can almost feel it in my body now, the face getting all red, you hear windows slamming because he doesn't want anyone to hear. And he physically abused, I had 1 brother, he physically abused him. And being the witness to that, I realized how painful it actually was and how many different emotions I carried through to my whole life. Fear, anxiety, just a sense of, not being safe because I wasn't safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were experiences I can remember vividly, like watching him. And I don't know where my other siblings were because I was in the middle. So there were 3 older and 4 younger. So, I'm just focused in on my feelings. It's sort of like a movie almost. But, I'm watching him being abused, kicked and punched. And I remember like leaving the house, holding my ears, people probably screaming, who knows, and not walking away too far because that would be dangerous, in case something happens, and coming back home. And so then the worst possible, I don't know if it was worse. So my brother, who was the one who was really abused, he ended up being killed in a car accident at 16 with 3 other boys. It was extremely
Oh,
traumatic. And I
gee.
remember the phone call, 3 in the morning,
Yeah.
coming through. Tommy's dead, he's been killed. And it was sort of just so tragic.
Wow.
And it was never processed in
How
the
did
family.
his father react to that, considering that he had abused him physically in that way, and then find him dead? Like, did he go through a kind of remorse with that?
He never did. His behavior continued until he died. And when I look back at my father, just very, very briefly, we don't hear too much about orphanages nowadays, but back when he was born in the 1930s, during the Depression, the Great Depression. So very poor. He lived in Arizona, and some mysterious thing happened to his mother. So the father dropped him and his siblings off at the local convent, because at that time, the convents took in children.
Oh, we've seen
And
a lot of that where I came from too, in Ireland. Oh my God, what trauma is inflicted upon
what
those little children. And
exactly?
not
So who
only,
knows?
yeah, and not only just the physical side of it, it's all about guilt and punishment. Guilt and punishment. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. The whole thing. So who knows what went on in that convent? I mean, he was dropped off at age 3, and at age, I think, 10, he was, pushed out into foster care. So he lived at several foster families. He told us
Hmm.
one foster family, he was, he had to live in the garage. And then at like 14, he was shipped over to Boys Town, Nebraska. I don't know if you remember that, Boys Town, with Father Flanagan. Yeah, it was very famous back then. And somehow he ends up working his way through Notre Dame, which, very good college, marries my mom. But what I saw in his behavior was, in retrospect, he was really a toddler. Even as an adult, he had these explosive temper tantrums. And for whatever reason, free will, unwilling to, that's the mystery. Why do some of us take the challenge and look at our lives and make changes while others don't? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you've seen that in your work.
Well, I'm glad you raised this kind of thing, because Aingeal Rose and I both have gone through, oh my God, the last like 18 or 20 years since we've been together, figuring out why is it that we seem to have to learn through adversity and punishment and trauma. I mean, why isn't it possible that we could learn through joy and happiness and love? And that has really been a puzzle for us. And in some ways, I think you're touching on that same thing. Like, is this kind of thing necessary? And is even the learning that we get from it, is that part of what we have set up for ourselves to learn from this in some way? And why can't we do it in a different way? So
Right.
do you have any understanding around that, Annie?
The only understanding that I can wrap my head around is that we're in the third dimension here, where there's polarity. We have positive and negative, so we have duality. And from my belief system, I think we come here because in this physical reality, we can learn certain things with this polarity, of back and forth. And then we move on, we reincarnate, if you believe in that, and we just continue to have these experiences. But I just, that's a very excellent question. Why do some choose to
Yeah.
learn and others don't? I often look at the ones who don't as it's very tragic, but maybe it's not tragic. Maybe they came here to play that role.
Right.
Maybe that's one thing that I've learned that has really, it's not an escape of saying that this is helping me to process tragedy, but sometimes if we are choosing our roles and, to learn to have experiences for increased consciousness and, have our soul evolve, then possibly some people are here to play a role to help others grow. So you can potentially look at the abuser or the negative player in your life as someone who's really providing a great gift.
You know, I had to deal with that myself. I don't know if you would have known, but I have mentioned it before to our listeners that my first baby died when he was 4 months old, and he died on my birthday. Now, it's a good number of years ago now, and in that sense, where they say time heals, I have come to terms with it. But here's the interesting thing. I remember at the time going through all those phases of grief, the anger and the grief and trying to understand the whole thing. And it really was a very upsetting thing for me, because I had not encountered death prior to that. And it was very tough. And really, the way I saw it was almost like a loss of expectation of my entire life.
Your entire life. Yep.
It took me 26 years really to come to terms with it. But here was the thing. As I did go, thankfully, with Aingeal Rose's help, I was writing things down. I was journaling all the time, and I was uncovering layers and layers and layers of what was going on underneath and why it upset me so much and what the impact it had on me and so on. The biggest question, of course, was, why did he die? And there was nobody had any answers for that. Why did he die? Nobody. Indeed, I called one, the books that I wrote, originally wrote one book, but it was too big. And I divided it into three and made it a little series called the Healing from Grief series, because it did help me through the whole thing. But here was the thing. I came to the conclusion that I was very grateful to him for dying. Now, that seems bizarre. And I know we may get reaction to this for saying that, right? But the fact is, it was only because he died that I went through all this internalization, all this seeking, and made me who I am today. And it made me far more loving than I was back then, and made me see things in a whole different light. And I'm very grateful to him for that. So in that way, I can say I learned from adversity, Now, I wish that it hadn't happened that way, but at the same time, I wouldn't change a thing right now, because none of what I know now may have happened if it wasn't for his gift to me.
Absolutely. And that is the thing. And losing a child, I mean, I cannot even imagine. I mean, I lost a brother. So I saw what happened to my mother, who shut down, and I think my father blocked out, like he probably blocked much more, a lot of other things out. And, so I just can't even imagine that. But to say that in the end that you can see possibly a purpose is incredibly empowering, really. And you can't fake that. You can't fake that thing was meaningful. You really have to feel at the depths of your being. And, it's funny because as I was reviewing some notes as to what I wanted to talk about today, and the grand finale really for me was absolutely the same situation. I ended up seeing we'll say the most recent trauma type thing as a gift, and as actually being grateful for the person who instilled this upon me. Because when I look at my life, and I know that you do Akashic record readings, and I at one point had a reading with you guys, and then I had something before that pointed out that one of the things that I was carrying here is victimhood. And it's funny because if I look at my life, I see over and over and over again where I attracted situations, I take ownership for them, of victimhood. And they can be funny, they actually can be funny now. Situations, growing up, or with my children, or, just kept continuing in my life, even as an adult. I'm like, what? I never thought of myself as a victim. But as soon as I recognized that, and I saw it for what it was, it's like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And then it stopped. And that brings me into the other thing that I did want to mention is that, we were not taught this, at least I wasn't, that we're made up of energy. We are all energy. Our bodies are electric and magnetic. We're not taught any of that. So, the electricity we get, the positive ionosphere coming from above, discharging below, and every electrical, conduit has surrounded
Yeah.
by a magnetic field. So we have like this torus of energy. And we also, I learned from my biofield tuning classes, we have a field about 6 feet that goes out around our body. And it very much, we carry trauma, energetic, whatever happens in our life is stored. Everything is there. And a lot of our physical problems come first in the energetic field. So, I could have an energetic, like a block out here by my hip, and eventually I'm going to have physical hip problems.
Right.
Then it all relates to emotion too. So,
Yeah.
but the
Well, I'm
point
glad you mentioned that now, because I wanted to talk, and I know that our listeners will be keen to know about biogeometry and the emotion code, and you are qualified and certified in both of those. Can you tell us a little bit about that in the light of the background now that you've just told us? What motivated you to go into that kind of healing, and what are the benefits, and what have you found out about it?
Well, I am a forever seeker and learner, and at some point that also becomes an excuse to not really living the life you're meant to. Like you can continue to learn, but if I'm only doing that full time, then I'm not assisting anyone anywhere. So the way these things pop up, I think the biofield tuning actually was one of the first things I learned. And that's when I really was exposed to that we're energy. And then I delved into the books that we are made of energy and how it works, and that our thought is a form. Our thought is actually a form. It's not invisible. When I have a thought, it's projected out across space. It's a real thing. And so biogeometry, taught me many of the things about our environment, and it's a fascinating field. It's all about bringing harmony. Rather than changing something, it's about bringing harmonious elements to it. It's kind of hard to describe, but Dr. Kareem discovered 3 different qualities that he calls BG3, where you'll find in the past, it's where all the cathedrals were built. It was where the important sites were built, because back then everyone knew about this energy. And these were
Right.
considered power spots, and they radiated energy out, where in our world today, most of us think we're just this body. And I knew innately somehow. I looked in the mirror once, maybe I was 12 or 13, and I thought, well, that's not me. I knew that wasn't me. I knew that I was a lot more than that, but I didn't know how I knew it. It was one of
Yes.
those memories that came
Yeah.
through. But the more we understand that we're made up of this electric magnetic, that we're electric magnetic beings, and that everything is energy. And we understand that, we're having an interaction right now, and our energy fields are combining, and we're making thoughts, and the thoughts are, being projected out. We're so much more powerful that way. And
Yeah.
so you were asking about the emotion code. Yes. So I continued with my studies, primarily it was the biofield training, and then I tried the prana healing, just all different modalities. The emotion code was wonderful again, because it's tapping into that subconscious to find out what can be released. And again, it's relying on our magnetic body to release it, because the way you do is you either take a magnet or your own hand, and you go over the governing meridian as you're releasing the emotion. It works very well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And soul realignment is just another modality. When I look at all the modalities I've learned, my most recent one is called Psych-K. It's all about biology of belief that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about, and I know you have it on your website. It's understanding that we do create our reality. We really do. It's not a figure of speech. We create it.
Yeah.
And, when we understand that our belief system is, again, it's energy, it's a thought form, it's projected out. And magnetically, we're going to bring back exactly what we are putting out. It's
Yeah.
the,
Does that understanding, Annie, help you to come to grips with what's going on in the world in general terms, politically, historically? Does it help you understand what we created and what's going on right now?
It does. And it's very interesting what's going on right now. Because the biggest takeaway that I've had the last few years is that I don't know what's real anymore, because it's all lies. It's just unbelievable. When we open our eyes to just common sense or discerning, we can just see things like, well, no, that building couldn't have been built by horse and buggy. So we can start to see things. But all I know is that all the trauma that goes on, this is one thing. I know that there's something out there. I don't know what it is. I could call it many different things, that wants us separated, wants us separated from ourselves and from each other. And they want us in a state of fear where we're disempowered.
But indeed, isn't that what the A Course in Miracles says about the body? That we've come to demonize the body.
Yeah.
That's because we see it as separate, like we created it. And because I can touch the boundaries of it, I'm saying I'm separate from everything else. But that is not at all the case. So we're living in that lie from the get-go, that we are separate. And then we blame it. We blame ourselves. And then we go into victimhood. You talked about victimhood about it. And then we go into, suffering and pain as a result of that, because we need to crucify ourselves because we separate
and others, right? And others, we crucify others too, right? Because when they're different, and we can touch this, it's just vibrating very, very slow, but in reality, it's empty space. So that's very hard to explain, to describe. But the one thing I would say that can help the world now to understand, when someone asks me, like, politically, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do politics with you, because I know the agenda and I'm not going to do it. And, one of the
that's
things,
very wise, because that's what that whole agenda is designed to polarize, like I say, them and us, and the body and outside, all of that. So it's a very good point. And do you think that
I have been trapped there? I have tried to convince others of my way of thinking, but when you realize, you step back and you're like, well, no, that's not right either.
Yeah. So do you think all of the studies that you've done have helped you to arrive at this? Or do you think that your understanding of what's going on now with yourself and the outer world, let's call it, arose from your upbringing and from your parents? When we talked earlier about that trauma.
I think that it is a combination of many things. When I think about who we are as we exist, I do really strongly believe that we bring with some ancestral stuff, and we bring, some past lives. We bring with our childhood experiences, and we bring with, downloads that we get growing up and with others. And again, I don't know why some people are inquisitive and question things, and why others blankly seem to be hypnotized. I don't understand that. I don't judge it anymore. I will admit that I judged that. I thought, wake up, wake up, wake up. But no, I can't do that. So I think it all helps to understand where we're at right now. There's a ton of mystery as to what's going on out in the world, but I'm recognizing more and more and more that some people who pose as spiritual, gurus there's another agenda there too. It can be very.
It's funny you should say that, because Aingeal Rose and I have been in deep discussions about this over the last several months, because people who we heretofore would have regarded as seers, people be able to recognize what's going on in the bigger picture, we're seeing a kind of agenda going on there too.
Yes.
Which is quite staggering, actually, when you come to see it. And I'm glad you raised that. It can be quite a shock.
It is so shocking. And when you are someone who is seeking knowledge, and you go out and you learn and we're like, well, this is a good solid source. Well, this is a good solid source. And you start listening and then something happens by the grace of our source or God or whatever you want to call it. We see little inconsistencies and we're like, wait, what is this? And it's really quite shocking.
Yeah. But in another way too, the way I have reconciled that within myself is in much the same way as I talked about my son. I see it in a way as a gift. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Do you know? Because I wouldn't necessarily have seen it and I wouldn't have understood it. Do you know?
Yeah.
So all of these things in that way they're little guides along the way, little nudges to seek
they
truth.
Help us. You know what I think it's all coming down to, Ahonu, is we have been conditioned. Again, there's no blame, no victimhood. I know that's not where I want to go. But for whatever reason, we've been conditioned to look outside of ourselves for the answers.
The authority problem, Aingeal calls it.
The outside for everything. And every single time I come across a new person that I'm like, well, this person is I'm going to join their Patreon group. Oh my God. Then I'm like, wait, how many times do I have to learn this over and over again? I can't look for them for the answers. The answers are within me.
Yes.
And they are within you.
Yes.
We can find some guides like you and, Aingeal Rose. But when you start telling us what's happening and there's clues to know you're on the wrong track with these spiritual leaders, because they should be giving the power back to us.
Right.
You're such a world of empowerment. You want to empower others. You're not empowering yourself. You're empowering others.
Indeed, that's one of the things I've often heard Aingeal Rose saying to people either when she's doing an Akashic record reading or in a group Akashic record session that we do every month. You'll always hear her saying, Source does not tell you what to do. And that is because we are empowered ourselves to know. We have the knowing within us always. But
we don't believe it. We don't believe it. We think we need those answers. Yeah. We think we need them from the outside. And
it's very interesting.
Back to another thing that can help us, I think, right now in today's world is, are you familiar with Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness, the scale from 0 to 1,000? So that is he wrote, Dr. David Hawkins wrote several books, but one of them is Power versus Source. And one of the things that he discovered when he was living was he had a map of consciousness from 0 to 1,000, where the emotions are mapped out and it's measurable through kinesiology, muscle testing, or however you do it. And 20 is, I believe, shame. 50 is apathy. 100 is fear. And the whole point of this, 1,000 being enlightenment, is 200 is the point of empowerment. 200 is courage. So you can find your own vibration through whatever means. You can, like I said, kinesiology is pretty safe because you're tapping into the truth of the subconscious.
Right.
Or dowsing, however you do it. But 200, humanity, I believe, has just passed 200 for the first time. So you can be tempted to judge people and say, oh, this one's better because this person's at love, this person's down here in fear. It's not for that purpose. The purpose of it is to see how these emotions, prevent us from moving forward to various levels of freedom.
Yes. So that's what you do, though. You have a practice, Annie. Am I right in saying that? And you help people with this. So do you want to bring us to a close, because we're up against time now, and I want people to be able to find you. So where do they go to contact you?
Okay, well, right now I have a website that it's it's there. It's in the works because I'm shifting and changing some of the focuses
Okay.
because the focus is so broad. It can be, nutrition. We can do so many things.
Right.
So I have the website, and then I have an email, align@anniejansen.com. And I should have, it's either anniejansen.com is the website.
Okay.
That isn't we know, we talked about that. And then align@anniejansen.com. And the thing that I like to help people with is bringing with the various tools of, really, I like to focus on their emotions because people get stuck.
Yeah.
And when I can point out that their triggers are really their greatest gift, and they can
Yes.
start looking at the trigger as, becoming aware, and then you escape out of this trap of ego and mentality of victimhood and fear and all those things that we have the power, and we're perfect and we're brilliant and we're wonderful right now. We just need to rediscover it.
Well, Annie Jansen, I'll tell you, your enthusiasm is infectious, I'll tell you. And considering the background that you just told us about, your family and your upbringing and your death of your brother and all of that, I mean, that would take many people down. And here you are, bubbling with enthusiasm and talking brightly about love and the future and the joy and happy and increased vibration and frequency and all of that. And that is just so encouraging. So I find it a huge joy to have spoken with you today, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to, yeah. And I'd love to be able to talk to you again in due course. So with that, let's draw to a close and refer people can contact you at anniejansen.com. You spell that with a Jansen, Annie Jansen.
Correct. Yep. ANNIE. Yep.
And then align@anniejansen.com to contact you. Great.
Yes.
All right,
Thank you for
Annie.
the opportunity.
Until next time, blessings to you. Very welcome.
You too.
Take
Thank
care.
you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose and Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.